You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner with The Wedding Biz, brought to you today by Party Slate, the first website designed specifically for event professionals and venues. And on The Wedding Biz, I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons of the weddings and event industry, all to provide you with education and inspiration. And if you missed last week's episode, it was a revisit of my first interview of Cindy Novotny from 2018. Cindy is the founder of Master Connections Associates, an internationally renowned leader in sales, leadership, and customer service, and that was a dynamic interview. Today's guest is photographer Paul Morse with Paul Morse Studios, based in New Orleans. Paul's talent and unique style have earned him the trust of presidents, world leaders, Fortune 500 companies, and numerous bridal couples. Following a successful photojournalism career at the Los Angeles Times, Paul served as a White House photographer, documenting the lives of President George W. Bush and his family. He also documented President Obama's inaugurations and served as a lead photographer for the Clinton Global Initiative. This is a real enjoyable interview to listen to. This is my conversation with Paul Morse. Paul, it's so good to have you on the phone. We were just figuring it out a moment ago that it's been many years since we saw each other and engaged, but I assume you're doing well?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Andy. It's great to see you or meet you again online here, but I'm honored to be on your show.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for saying that. And I've been thinking about having you on a long time, and I'm just so glad that this worked out for today. So, one of the first things that I'm thinking about in terms of your career and your trajectory, first of all, how old were you when you first felt like a really strong passion for photography?
That's a good question. And I'm going to date myself. It was in high school, honestly, in 1980. Yeah, in high school. I went to high school in Santa Monica in California. And I knew back then I wanted to be a photographer. I was really interested in doing newspaper photography and photojournalism. And I started doing that for the local paper while I was in high school. I would do freelance assignments for them, shoot sports and news, and deliver them under deadline, way back in high school. And then I went to Cal State Long Beach and have a degree in journalism there. And I've always known I wanted to be a news photographer and be a photographer. And that's the only career I've had.
Wow, really? I did read that you did photojournalism, or you started it at the LA Times. Was that during high school, or was that after you graduated?
That was a little after I graduated. I first worked at the Pasadena Star News there in Southern California. And then there was an opportunity at the LA Times. They had an opening, and I was freelancing there prior to that opening, but I made a goal to try to impress someone, a different editor, every week leading up to the time when that job was going to open up. And when it did, they said, well, we want to have you, we want to bring you on full time. And they were kind of surprised I did, because you said you're so successful as a freelancer. Why would you want to come to work for the LA Times? I said, it's always been a dream to be part of an amazing newspaper and to be able to cover stories like y'all do. So, I was very fortunate to be hired on for them, for full time.
Well, then how and when did you transition over to weddings?
Well, it's interesting. There was another step from the LA Times. Is in 2001, I got a call from one of my best friends from college, and he was just made the White House photographer for President George W. Bush. And he called me, he said, hey, would you mind coming? Would you want to come help me start the White House photo office in Washington, D.C.? And I said, yeah, that would be amazing. That's something that I'd be so honored to do. And so I went out to Washington, and after about a week, realized that they were going to offer me a job. And so I left a great thing in LA, that job, and started work as the deputy director of photography at the White House. And so they asked me to do everything that I did at the newspaper for the White House, document things in the way that I did, cover stories essentially, but not for the journalism, for history, for the president's archives, for the National Archives. And then within that time, the staff is very young at any White House, and they were getting married. They're getting engaged and getting married, and they said, hey, Paul, we'd love your pictures. We see your pictures throughout the West Wing. would you be interested in photographing our wedding in the same way that you do, pictures for the president? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. I said, I'm kind of new to the wedding business, but I know how I can do it. I know what my strengths are, and started doing that. And so after I left the White House in 2007, immediately people started calling and said, hey, can you do our wedding? We love your pictures. We've known you for a long time. We have a great relationship. Can you come do our wedding? And so that's when I started essentially full time in 2007.
Wow. Well, I want to go back for a minute. I want to stick with what you were talking about, the White House, because I am aware, I just didn't know the timeline, but I knew that you were there, doing this kind of work. And so I looked at a lot of the photos, and, I wasn't necessarily a fan of President G.W. Bush, but I'll tell you what, your photos were just of him were just absolutely stunning. And each one, really does tell a story. And so I wonder if you could describe a photo or two of President G.W. Bush and the story behind each. I would love to hear that.
I'd be happy to. To go back, honestly, I can say I didn't vote for President Bush at the time. I wasn't really involved with politics. I thought I knew everything about the White House, about the president, Republican or Democrat, from what I read, and so that was part of the reason I took the job, is I wanted to see things from the inside and kind of experience what happens. And I learned a lot, and learned that pretty much everything that I thought I knew was just the opposite.
Oh yeah, what do you mean? Like what?
Everything that people would label a certain party, and I'm not going to go into which one, was just the opposite about the way they treat people, their priorities, their openness. Was just kind of the opposite. And I didn't take the job for political reasons. I did it to document history. And it was really an eye-opening experience, really amazing. And not everyone will get that chance. And it's almost impossible for anyone to know really what goes on in the White House. But I always respect people's opinions to whatever they think the president, how the president's doing, what they think of him. That's what makes America great. You can speak your mind. Yeah. But I have personally a different perspective on it. And I feel it makes my life a lot richer. And I, when I did that job, I wanted to be able to show those pictures, show those moments for history, for our country, for forever, because I knew the pictures could be well preserved by the National Archives, and that people could draw their own story from those. Try to take the pictures as honestly as possible, and let people kind of see a story that they wanted to read from it.
And one of the things I got from it, was you did capture the humanity that these people have.
True. Yeah, that was the goal. I wanted to show that while President Bush and, I've done work for President Clinton and for President Obama, after they've been out of office, it's the same thing. You want to show that they're real people and give people a perspective that they are humans. They have emotions. They have, sensitivities. They have strengths, and they may have weaknesses, but, that's what you want to show. And was my ultimate goal. And so some of the pictures I could think of right away, some of them were not from at the White House. Like one of my favorites is at the president at his ranch in Crawford, Texas. He would go down there quite frequently, and part of his way of relaxing was to be cutting cedar. And I was always a part of that, to document it and to take part and to help. But one day, it was real smoky. We were burning the cedar, and it started to rain, and they had a long drought, like a 2-year drought going there in Texas. And as soon as the rain started coming down, the president put his arms out and let the raindrops hit his face. And
yes,
I thought, I kind of anticipated something might happen. Only, a lot of what I do is anticipation. So I thought that maybe something might happen with that. And I was kind of in the right spot at the right time, and just put his arms out. And that's like one of my all-time favorites, because I think it shows, his connection to the land, to nature. And it's almost, in a way, kind of like a redemptive type of picture.
That picture is one of the ones that really stuck out to me. People listening, you should go on the website, or maybe we could put it in the show notes. But that photo was stunning, absolutely stunning.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and that's what I like to be known for. Honestly, that give a perspective on the president that you would never know or never see.
Right, right.
Cause you to slow down and look at it.
Yeah. There also, Paul, another one of the photos that I saw was of 4 presidents at one time standing around each other joking. I mean, Carter, Clinton, Obama, and Bush. What was that like? I mean, all that history standing right in front of you.
Well, that was incredible. That was at the opening of the President's Library in Dallas. And all the presidents, even including his father, was there, but he was in a wheelchair at the moment. We're all there to honor him and the opening of his library. They all do that for each other's library. And it was a moment I've always waited for, to have all the living presidents together in one spot and to show them interacting as real people, to joking around and their body language, their expressions. It's the most natural you're going to probably see them. And it's so rare they'd be all in one place. Right. And so
really,
that's one of those big moments where you say, this is really important. And I need to find something that's unique to it, not just of them standing there, but waiting for kind of a decisive moment that will give a whole new perspective and a new side of the story that people could look at and appreciate. And so, those are the things that you wait for almost always in your career, to have all the most important people that in our country's history in one spot. And I felt, that's when I can thrive.
Well, let's go back, earlier when you were talking about how when you were at the White House and people there knew of your work and asked if you could do weddings, and you said that you told me you knew what your strengths were, in terms of how you could apply them for weddings. What were you thinking of when you told me that?
The moments, the real moments of a wedding, where the first kiss, or the moment the bride and groom see each other for the first time, or when they're walking down the aisle, the expressions, the emotion, the body language are all come together in one moment, one or two moments. And, taking my experience from the newspaper world and from the White House, you had to try to tell everything in maybe one or two pictures, where that, exactly what's happening. It reads instantly in a very clean way, meaning the background is not distracting and everything. And again, it's the way I've always done things. And that's what I feel my strength is. I know how to anticipate where I need to be, what people's reactions are going to be. And hopefully it will happen in a beautiful location, a beautiful light. But if not, you still have to capture those. I capture those real moments that people can then relive their wedding day from.
And I have a question about that. Obviously, like you have a tab in your website titled Moments, and which is what we're talking about right now. And each one is just so full of emotion. And with what you're telling me, I mean, obviously they need to feel comfortable with their vulnerability to allow you in there, to be there and for them to act that way. How do you go about, what can you say about getting them to be comfortable with being vulnerable in front of you, with you?
Part of what I do is observe and watch and then kind of go in for the moment, be there, get closer, or be there right for it, but not to always be on top of them. I think it's really, really important to have regular people feel comfortable with you. The president was very comfortable with me at all times, but he knew when I was there always. And if he didn't want me there, he would throw me out of the room so much, per se. But I know real people can feel very self-conscious around a camera. So I would watch really closely and then move in and then be there for when it really, really mattered. And, part of it too is I like to dress like the guests. I don't wear all black or anything like that. I like to wear whatever the guests are wearing, a tux or a suit, just so I'm like part of the wedding party. And that goes back from the newspaper days where, you want to dress like your subjects. And back then we didn't wear suits and tuxes, but the goal was to blend in, and that's the way I blend in. And that always really, really helps.
Many of our past guests, including Brian Raffinelli, Cece Johnson, Colin Cowie, and Lynn Easton, all use Party Slate to showcase their event work and build their businesses. And if you're not familiar with Party Slate, It's a website that inspires people planning events and connects them with the leading event professionals and venues across the country and the world. This is a really, really great website. You can sign up for a free profile where you can upload unlimited photos and events, or you can explore one of their membership options for even more exposure. And Party Slate has launched in 11 cities so far, including Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, Dallas, and Miami, and they are coming to a city near you soon. Visit partyslate.com to learn more. Again, you really got to check out partyslate.com. There are obviously challenges that are unexpected that come up, and some of them can be kind of major. And I found a wonderful quote about you, which brings one of these up from a former client. And it's, quote, this is from the client speaking. "I woke up on my wedding day bummed out that it was cold and rainy. Nothing close to an ideal day for your wedding. But then Paul had all these great ideas, and we used the rain to our advantage, and we now have the most beautiful pictures from our wedding day. I don't think any other photographer could have helped us capture the day in the same way Paul did," unquote. So, Paul, if I were a photographer, I think I would also be really bummed seeing the bad weather. What went through your mind if you remember that day and in that moment? And can you describe the shots you took? And I imagine it's not the first time you've had such a challenge.
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember it very well. And, there's nothing you can do to stop the rain. And you have to
Sounds
go
like a
on.
song title.
Yeah, I know. I think so.
I know, all of a sudden, I'm like, I know that song.
I know. Yeah, you have to go on. The wedding day goes on. No one cancels their day because of the rain. And so it adds a new element to it. And then you start to think on your feet, well, what can we do? Where can we go? How can we use this element of the atmosphere to tell a story? And you just make it happen. And you try to protect the bride and groom with an umbrella or whatever you can, or boots. And that's one more aspect of the story that makes the pictures fun, but you just got to go and you can't stop. And they're expecting it from you, and they expect you to solve those problems too. You can't just say, "Oh, well, I don't know what to do. It's raining. We have to stick around for the next hour and a half." Well, that's a failure on my part. And so I need to go out and make it happen. If they're game, I'm game. I'll get wet. The cameras will get wet, but I know we'll come back with great pictures. So you got to be an optimist. You got to think on your feet, and you got to make it happen. There's just no other alternative. I mean, that's what I've always believed. You have to deliver. And so there's no going back.
So what is the, let's say, the early part of the process with clients? Like when you meet them, do you tend to go to their house? Is it more on the phone? I know now after COVID, maybe we can get into this too. Maybe you got to deal with it more virtually. But what do you do from the beginning in order to get to know them and start to, warm them up to working with you?
Well, I like to obviously try to meet them in person. Sometimes it's at a coffee shop. I don't go drinking with them. Because I think we all kind of want to be level-headed, and I just get to ask them questions about where they're from, how they met, what's their history, who's their friends. In New Orleans here, everyone seems to know each other. So I kind of like to bring up names of people that I possibly have photographed, and that usually makes people warm up to me because they know I know their friends, and I've done hopefully a really good job for their friends. And so I like to hear their stories. I like to hear how they met. All the things that'll be talked about during the speeches, I want to know firsthand because it gives me a whole insight to who they are. And I want them to feel comfortable with me going into it. I'm really lucky that the people that do hire me have seen my work and they do appreciate my approach. So there's not a whole lot of convincing about what I do. And there's not a lot of people asking me to do something I'm not really strong about doing or strong with. So it's a good match to from the beginning usually. And so it's just about, they ask me about what the day is going to be or how my approach to things. And what I always try to tell them is I want you all to have a really great day because that's going to make for great pictures. I want you to be happy, experiencing that day in its fullest because I know that's how I can deliver the best pictures for you. I can capture those moments.
How do you feel about digital versus film?
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. Because, I was listening to some of the other podcasts, which are outstanding, about some of the photographers talk about that. And I am one that started in film. I learned how to develop film in a darkroom, make prints and everything. And, it's incredible. That got me hooked in photography. But as digital came along, at first, it wasn't there. I mean, I've used it from its basically infancy, at least in the professional realm, up to where it is today. And I don't think film allows me to capture the moments that I'm known for. I tend to work fast and under conditions that the lighting isn't so great. And there is a different way of working with film. There's a limitation, so the light you can shoot in and the pictures you can deliver. So I know it's their strengths. I love the aesthetic of film. I know it's a different workflow. And when you're shooting it, I think my clients tend to want to move a little faster. They don't want to stop for too long. So that's part of the reason I don't go in that direction of film. I think nowadays film is beautiful. It's an analog format, but it's always scanned in to a digital format. So it's
interesting point.
Why, you can make beautiful prints from negatives. I think that's really rare nowadays. I think anything that people get are from scanned files. So to me, it's like, well, why have that intermediate step? Why don't you go right from the highest quality right to whatever you're going to deliver? And it also provides me the chance to share pictures immediately, which I think is critical. And it's something that it's the reason I got into photography, actually. I remember making 8x10 black and white prints of my friends and then taking it to them, sharing that. Is way, way, way before social media. But the experience of seeing the reaction, it got me hooked. And that is something that digital photography allows me to do that still, even greater so today.
Yeah. How do you think about framing and composition, those various elements, lighting, all of that? What can you say about that?
I try when I compose my pictures to get several elements in the picture. Always work with the background. The background, I think, tells as much as the story as the foreground. Light is part of that composition. Where you take it, when you take it, is always critical. And try in the composition is anticipating again a reaction. So giving a little room around the subject in case something happens that I can always crop into, but I will have it. Nothing's cut off or anything. So I think I tend to shoot a little bit, they say, looser than I used to, meaning I can have more room around the subject. And I tend to shoot vertical now because for social media, honestly.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Verticals lend better to squares in Instagram and things like that. And some of the photographers I've always admired, they always shoot verticals. And I think the compositions work a little bit better. It feels a little more natural to me now than it did working in the newspaper. And even at the White House, because everything that we had there was horizontals. The prints in the West Wing, they're all horizontal. So I think I've changed in that respect.
How do you feel about, you bring up social media, how do you feel about social media as a marketing tool? I mean, you've experienced pre and post social media time in this life.
Well, I think it's incredible. I mean, it's, again, a way to share things really very easily and instantly. The thing that I kind of have a problem with is that it kind of, it creates a homogeneous style that I think is not really good for photography. It's good for the people who look at it. I think they get accustomed to something that's familiar. But I think as photographers, you should have your own vision in the way you do things. And that may not translate to the most likes. I've learned that there are certain pictures that will definitely get you more likes if that's really important to you. But I kind of, as someone who has been an educator too, I try to say, don't go with what everyone else is doing or likes to do. Go what feels right. Because as an artist, that's what ultimately is the only thing you need to do is, go with what your heart is telling you is right. And so it's a conflict that I have with social media. And I truly appreciate the people who are really good at it and they have such influence, and they're getting amazing work from that, and the people want their weddings shared over 40,000 viewers. I totally get that, and I would have to say I'm totally envious too. But I think staying true to the way you do things is probably the most important thing, and the thing that's kind of taught me about it.
Mm. And Paul, you've done this for so long. I mean, like you said, it was, right out of school. You've been doing this full time. At this point in your career, what's the hard part? What do you struggle with?
It's interesting. I would say insecurity.
Really? At this point, still?
Yeah. I mean, that may just be me, but I always feel that, I think I'm too humble in a lot of ways. I don't really talk about myself. I always believe that, my pictures should be me, and people should recognize that. I think the hardest part is, promoting myself. And I feel, again, very sensitive to not getting responses from people. And, not all people are meant for that type of thing. I think that's probably the hardest thing for me is I always wanted to be accepted for my work. And I feel I do, when I think about it, I do have an incredible career, and it's still going, but I still have that insecurity.
Geez, it's interesting when you think that. I'm thinking, I mean, I've got the band business, and I've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I've been through a lot of my career, and I've done some enormous jobs that I'm real proud of. I used to get a whole lot of press and awards and stuff. And that stuff isn't as important to me lately. However, I can relate to what you're talking about in terms of still just being recognized for my talent. I think, I don't know. I think that we all deal with that. It's almost like since we were children. I mean, we still need a certain amount of reinforcement, I guess is what I would say, is what I would call it.
I agree. Yeah. My friends, my wife, they're always so supportive, and they say, you got to realize what you have accomplished and who trusts you and what you have done and the body of work that you've created. And even the clients start to say that. They feel a little, they say, why would you want to do my wedding? You've done all these great things. And I go, well, I want to share my skill, my talent with everyone. Yeah. And there's never going to be anything like the White House. So there's no way to really compare it to anything. So there's no need to say anything is less or better. You just appreciate for what it is. In every event, it's important to those people and to that family. It's the start of their history, and you create those heirlooms for them. So, yeah, that's kind of what I feel about that.
Yeah, no, I very well said. That's and before we go, I want to ask for the photographers listening, what gear are you now using lately?
I use a Sony mirrorless cameras. I use it's called the A1. I think they're top of the line digital camera. And then I like to use what they call prime lenses, meaning lenses that are fast apertures, that allow me to blur out the background, but also allow me to shoot action essentially under really low light conditions without having to bring in extra lighting. I always want to be inconspicuous as possible, and I don't want to have a bunch of flashes going off, and I think that's what makes me stronger as a photographer. That's what people like. They don't like the kind of entourage of me and an assistant circling them. And so, I also like the regular zoom lenses, and I have to really control myself about what I'm going to bring, because I will bring everything. And when something I have a feeling I want to use this lens, I kind of want it with me, but physically, I can't always do that. You don't want to be hauling around 30 pounds of stuff when you're bouncing around during the wedding day.
Yeah, I get it. Well, gosh, Paul, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed a conversation, and just so glad we finally got it done. We did it.
Yeah, we did. I really enjoyed it too, Andy. And so thank you again so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Paul Morse. You can check out his website at paulmorse.com. That's Paul, MORSE.com. For social media, on Instagram, you can find him at Paul Morse Weddings. Be sure to check out the show notes and our website of theweddingbiz.com. And tune in next week when I have Jennifer Stein, co-founder and editor-in-chief of Destination I Do magazine. And also subscribe to The Wedding Biz, particularly on Instagram at The Wedding Biz. And be sure to check out our sponsor's website of partyslate.com. And we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.